Hello and welcome to John and James Live. My name is John Hastings and I am with my co-host, Mr. James CeeLo. How are you today, James?
I'm very well, mate. What a beautiful day, isn't it? The
Ah,
sun is shining, the birds are singing, it's blue skies, not a
it's
cloud in the sky.
incredible. Absolutely incredible. We're bringing the passion, we're bringing the energy today,
Energy.
James. Looking sharp. I might need to get a little necklace, do you think?
It's me trying too hard, is what
So
it is. I'm
you're
thinking
trying to
maybe an
be,
earring next. It's a
this should be,
midlife crisis.
yeah, so you're trying to be young, isn't it? Trying to
It is,
be
mate. I'm
a vibe.
down with the
Anyway,
kids.
looks cool. So today, James, we're going to be talking about leadership. The AI revolution's taking over. The world is changing at rapid speed. People are scared. People are following. People are leading. We're going to talk about the leadership side. Might be leading your company. Could be even leading yourself. So we're going to take some lessons from history, the great leaders, the Mandelas of this world,
Love it.
and a few books in
Bit of
there as
Lincoln.
well. Bit of Lincoln, some of the big players in the game, all of the latest books on leadership, and let's try and disseminate it to see what we can learn, because we're going to have to sort of lead ourselves anyway, aren't we, James? Everybody's leading themselves in their own way. Maybe
There's
you're
nobody
leading your
coming to save you, mate. There's no knight in shining armor coming to
Really?
save you.
I'm waiting for my white knight on a
It's
horse
not coming,
to
mate.
come.
It might be me.
Maybe
It
you're
might
my
be
white
me.
knight. It could be. People use that saying a lot, don't they? No one's coming to save
Coming
you.
to save you. Yeah, it is
Feels a little
unfortunately true.
feels a little bit sad, doesn't it?
It does a little bit, but I think you've got to have a level of agency over yourself to do what you need to do, and then people will come on board to help you out. I think, it's that you can be quite skeptical and say there's nobody coming to help you, but
Yeah.
there is if you put the right energy out
I
into the
don't like
world.
that saying. It's a bit negative.
Shall we not say that again then?
Yeah, I'm going to put it out there and be a bit controversial and say I don't like that saying. I think there's always people that come along to give you a help. There's so many stories of the people helping each other, coming along at the right time. People are down and out, nobody believing in somebody, and then something
But they
comes
need
out
to
of
be able
nowhere.
to connect with you as an individual. They need to be able to feel some level of empathy to be able to connect and then feel like they want to help you.
Yeah. It does happen. The world
It does
works in
absolutely happen. We've
mysterious
seen it
ways,
happen.
doesn't it? Yeah, sometimes.
Mate, how did we meet, for example? That's how we met, wasn't it?
Yeah, I saw you sobbing on the floor. I came along, picked you up, changed your
Dusted
life.
me down.
That's what I did. Picked you up.
Changed my life is a strong assumption. That's a strong.
That's bold. That's a bold statement.
That is bold statement.
So, James CeeLo, we're going to kick off. I've sent you a little script.
You
today.
have.
Very organized.
Very unusual.
I'm a leader. I'm leading the way, leading the revolution here, James. So first of all, we are going to kick off with leadership tip, or why leaders fail: a lack of self-awareness. What is self-awareness, James? What is this self-awareness game that they're talking about or alluding to?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, the self-awareness piece, in my opinion, is, I think, the work that you've done on yourself in terms of acknowledging your failures and being open to admit that and say, look, none of us are perfect. We're all flawed and fallible in wonderful ways. But it comes down to, I think, dealing with maybe some traumas that you've had previously that you can then allow yourself to be open and honest without fear of judgment and say, you know what, I don't know. And that's okay not to know. You can't know everything.
Yeah.
But I've had conversations with people and I find it absolutely fascinating that they cannot be seen to be flawed or fallible. They absolutely must have everything rehearsed, already set up. They've got to be seen to be a master of whatever it is that they're engaged in, that they just cannot have any chinks in the armor. They've got to be seen as the pinnacle of whatever field they're in. And I get it. I understand that. And it's a real fear. And people are reactive to that. And I think they'll start to defend their position if they feel like they're under attack. And if they're coming from that position of fear, then potentially anybody could try to attack them or undermine them or make them look stupid in front of other people. I've had those conversations with people.
Yeah, it's a definite worry, isn't it, to show that vulnerable side and then be judged or not be in control. I guess there's a lot of leaders out there that thrive on control. Sometimes the great leaders are brilliant at being able to delegate, know their own weakness, and build teams that sort of complement them or better than them in many different areas. Most of the great leaders are more of the people who put the jigsaw together, aren't they? They put things together, people in the right places that can thrive. Yeah. And they have the vision, the story, the personality, that sort of drive to make things happen and guide the ship, as they say. But I reckon in terms of what we've done in the past, we're a fan of personality testing. Enneagram's fantastic. MBTI is fantastic. You can use them. You can smash them into ChatGPT. You can do all sorts to, disseminate your own personality, and it can tell you if you don't know yourself and you got blind spots, then this can be a mirror for you. And
a really interesting thing to do is to ask what people think of you. Now it depends on who you ask, because
don't ask your wife. Just don't ask
honest
your wife.
Answer. Yeah, that's a whole heap of trouble right there. But I mean, if you're running an organization or even your friendship group, just say, what do you think about me? What are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? It's not just like, oh, well, big me up, make me feel better about myself. But it's like, where do I really seem to struggle? And depending on the relationship you got with that individual as to whether they'll be really honest with you. And so, well, look, James, you have a tendency to jump around a lot, which I do. You'll sort of see something and you go, oh, yeah, that looks interesting. And then you're sort of off in that direction. And then you don't actually do something for long enough to sort of bring it into life in a meaningful way. So it is an uncomfortable position to be in, to ask somebody to do a character assassination.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's huge amounts of growth and learning from it, because, when you're in your own head, you can kind of think, well, people perceive me in a particular way.
Yeah.
And they might see you something completely different. And we've had those conversations and we've had those preconceived ideas about people that we think they're going to be a particular, and they're totally different.
Totally different. Yeah. Patterns of behavior are quite cyclical though, aren't they? Habits die hard. Normally life will slap you in the face with what the actual issues are. And it's just whether you wake up and listen when things are not going quite right. And
it's
you just keep
in the right mindset
doubling
to receive
down.
It. Yeah.
You're like doubling down on what doesn't work. You got to be adaptable and open, aren't you? I think that's pretty much what that self-awareness side says. I know it says many leaders chase status or control, not service or impact. That can be a case in some cases. Ego blocks feedback, adaptation, and trust. So,
ego is the thing. It's like, what is ego?
If we went Freudian, there's like 3 types of ego. There's the consciousness side of ego. There's the authenticity. Yeah, there's a lot to ego. So is it the false self, or
I don't think it's as easy or straightforward just to say, oh, he's got a big ego, or she's got a big ego, or they've got a big ego.
We could do an hour session on ego itself, couldn't we? We could disseminate. Maybe we will do a session on
sense of self, isn't it? It's a sense of self, fundamentally.
Yeah, and that can be your perception, of yourself, of situations, can evolve and change over
Yeah.
time, depending on what experiences you have. You start altering your beliefs. But if you're being stubborn and you're not listening to feedback around you,
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, you've got to make a decision as a leader, haven't you? Otherwise, nothing gets done. If you're like, oh, well, I'm
yeah,
not sure. And, well, what do you think? What do you think? And then you sort of vacillate, then, there's a fine line. So you can't say that actually a great leader is taking everybody's sort of opinion and not knowing what to do with it. Well, they'll listen. And, I think great leaders that are able to run teams really effectively are the ones that do ask for their opinion and listen and take it on board. But ultimately, they've got to make the decision which is in the best interests of the company.
yeah,
And that is a hard job because there's consequences. But somebody has to make a decision to say, this is where we're going. But it should really be a decision made collectively. But somebody has to make that final judgment to say, well, that's the direction we're going in, chaps. That's
I
the
think that's a
job
great
of a
point,
leader,
to
isn't
be
it?
honest. Yeah, sometimes you can take on board information, but sometimes you got to just move away from that and sort of dig into your gut feel, listen to the data. Again, leadership, I would say, an important thing, James. It requires context. Because in the football world context, I would say, some players on the pitch have had fantastic careers, leaders, captains of their club. Once they move into management, they're awful. So they're a leader in one context. They move into a management role as a leader, trying to manage different personalities, and they're just terrible at it. So
it doesn't always translate.
No, it's situational. It requires context. And again, you can be leading yourself, and it depends what context best suits your personality.
I mean, it's interesting when you see how many military leaders, for example, have gone into industry as consultants as opposed to setting up necessarily their own businesses. They go in to, guide leaders how to lead. Because I guess you can't think of a much more stressful situation to be in than when you're in combat.
Yeah.
And obviously they've been trained in a particular way. They will have been broken down as an individual and built back up. They will have been taught how to follow orders, otherwise everything breaks down. And then how that then translates to the corporate world. That's really interesting as well, isn't it?
It's very interesting. There's so many layers to that one as well, because you could say somebody who's leading certain things within the army, they are actually following orders from somebody in a boardroom above. So are they leading or are they following? It's where do you draw the line?
They've got to get people following them. If they've been given a direct order, how do they then get everybody else to follow that order further down the line?
So the leader is the follower and vice versa. It gets very weird and complex, but we'll stick with that. So it says on here, vision without integrity or follow through. So sometimes, people can have the ideas, they have that vision, but maybe they're not being able to communicate that to people around them. They're not able to get that messaging across. And then they say execution is 90% of everything. So can you actually persuade people to jump on your train and then get them to, and then, get the train to leave the station? That's the hard bit, isn't it?
Yeah, because you'll know loads of people that talk about lots of stuff and don't actually do anything about it. Again, it's a fear-based thing of committing to it. It's great when it's just in your head because it's nice and safe. But as soon as you then bring it into the world and birth it, it's a very different kettle of fish. Yeah, so we can talk about it. It's great. We're really confident. We can talk a great game, but then when it comes to actually implementing, it's another matter. And we all know people that, talk a good talk, but don't actually do anything with it. So
I was watching behind the scenes with Diary of a CEO yesterday, and Stephen Bartlett said about his the friends that he's got around them who are the most into manifestation and visualization actually do the least.
Yeah,
They
it's
are
interesting.
the least action. He's more action orientated, less saying, more doing.
It
So
kind of makes
it's
me think about like an accident, a scene of an accident. You sort of turn up, and the people that are making the most noise are the ones you ignore to begin with, and the ones that are very
yeah,
quiet are the ones that really do need your attention straight away.
we're just
It's
getting
almost that
things
kind of thing,
done.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, then you got the best of both worlds with people like, I don't know, Steve Jobs. You know, he's very outwardly projecting. Even a Stephen Bartlett, he's got both, hasn't he? He's very outwardly in his persona, documenting
mm,
his journey, creating that story, getting people excited, getting people on board, whilst actually taking, making the things happen. Just doing it basically. So
yeah,
if you're in the silence, maybe you're doing yourself disjustice. You might be getting on with things in the background, but could you amplify it if you had, the courage to step forwards and be more vocal? Maybe you can be the action taker and amplify what you're doing to a whole new level,
yeah,
potentially. That
yeah,
could be a thing. So it says inspirational words without consistent action lead to disillusionment. Definitely.
yeah.
People
I've
follow
been
example, not direction. I think that's a good point, isn't it? Leading by demonstration. Because it's like if you're a parent, you tell your kids to do something and you're not doing it
right.
yourself. It's like if you
I've
tell them
done
to
it.
eat
I've done it a
healthily and
lot.
you're eating burgers,
Yeah, I've done it a
probably
lot,
like,
and I suddenly became very aware of promising a lot and delivering very little. And I'd see, you can see the disappointment in their faces. You're like, yeah, yeah, we're going to do that, we're going to do that, and you get filled with that enthusiasm, and in the moment, you get caught in the emotion of the moment, and you'll say, yeah, yeah, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and then just get overwhelmed, and then don't do it.
yeah,
And if you do that enough, very quickly, you'll become that person who promises much and delivers very little.
yeah.
And yeah, that was me. That was me.
Yeah,
And
my friend Drew in the health space, he works with a lot of people, football teams on, authenticity and leadership. And he just said it's the hardest thing to just show up authentically, like 24 hours a day. Like
yeah,
it's easy to, give yourself lip service, but have to show up, be vulnerable, put yourself on the line. Leadership it's not for the faint-hearted. It's probably not what, the story, it's not the fairy tale. It can be isolating, I guess. If you're the leader, then you're not one of the masses of people following. You're putting your neck on the line a lot of the times. You probably
for
hold the
very
most
little reward
responsibility.
initially. It's that leap of faith. It's that
Yeah,
blind faith. I think you're just doing stuff 24/7 and getting very, very little back.
yeah.
You just have to have belief in what you're doing and keep grinding away.
And again, let's go back to context, because we're just talking about leaders maybe of a big company or a revolution or a following in terms of the people right at the peak of doing something. But there's 1,000 other leaders, or could be millions of other leaders behind them. Everybody's a leader in their own household.
Mm,
You're a lead. You could be leading by just keeping your body healthy. You're leading your family by showing up and listening. You're leading by being empathetic to an employee or a colleague at work. That can be showing leadership. There's so many levels to it. It doesn't
yeah,
just mean the CEO of a company or the manager of a football team or the best football player in the world. That's not really how it
principles are the
works, is
same,
it?
aren't they? Yeah,
Definitely. So again, we move on to neglect of emotional intelligence, poor listening, reactive behavior, or lack of empathy fractures teams. Leaders are mirrors. Your energy sets the emotional tone. Listening's there's a Simon Sinek where he said was it Leaders Eat Last? I think that was one of the books, wasn't it? Where he said you see the people who are a lot most respected, and I've heard this with a Ty Lopez talk when he said He met Elon Musk in a toilet, and Elon Musk asked him a question and got, Tai Lopez to basically give him all the information that he wanted. Elon didn't talk, and then he just said, "Brilliant, thank you," and walked away. So he's the leader extracted the information that he wanted, didn't say anything, listen, and then he's learned something. The other person who's talking is not learning.
People want to be seen and heard, and they want to be validated. And I think people that can very quickly learn somebody's name or remember their name, and if they meet them again, they remember their name or a detail about them. So like, maybe their wife wasn't very well the last time they met them, whatever. You hear a lot of stories like that, don't you? About people that really connect. I think Bill Clinton, for all of his foibles and flaws, was incredibly good at doing that. For example, he made you apparently feel like you were the only person in the room at that moment in time. He would zero in and focus on you.
This is a really bad analogy, James. I'm just getting flashbacks of.
I'm gonna caveat that it was apparently male or female, but he would be very good at doing it, and that's what people would remember. They
doing what?
I think would last long in the memory.
Yeah, we'll move on swiftly from
moving on. But I think that was a very good analogy, personally. But so for that, for example, and then another thing I think is when you have a leader that does their kind of research beforehand. So Richard Branson was on a podcast I listened to recently. They were doing like a Q&A, so they'd have like a phone in. So you'd have businesses calling in. It was Guy Raz on How I Built This, and periodically does these podcasts where they can have people call in. They've got a business idea, they can run it past somebody of note. So Richard Branson was on it, and he'd obviously had details on the callers that were coming on because he'd done some preparations. So one particular caller came on and said, I understand that the idea came from this experience you had in a hotel room where the service was really bad, blah, 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 blah. So he'd done his research, and the person that was on the call was like gobsmacked that Sir Richard Branson would know that level of detail about them, little me. And they were almost speechless.
Yeah.
Because he'd gone to that trouble. Richard Branson had gone to that
probably
trouble.
Like a utilization of time as well, isn't it, James? Because time's that commodity that nobody can buy back. So I guess they're masters of time in terms of their efficiency and use of it. The sort of getting more bang for your buck. So you want to be well prepared. I know Bezos does this. If you want to have a meeting with an Amazon, you have to have like a pitch deck to have just a simple meeting. He doesn't want to waste time going back to back meetings when nothing gets done. Everything's got to be efficient, well prepared, well oiled machine, especially on a business with thin margins. So
yeah. And another thing that Bezos did, I believe it was Bezos, is that originally he would be the center of attention in meetings. He would be there, and all of his sort of C-suite were worried about saying anything because they didn't want to upset him, and everybody was on their guard. So what he was told, he was advised this. I don't know that he made up his own mind about this, but he was advised to come in at the end of the meeting and not to speak until right at the end. So if he came in and spoke first, that impacted on everybody. So he had the self-awareness, or he was able to take that advice to come in either at the end of the meeting or to not speak until everybody else had spoken. Yeah. So it just got the best out of everybody. Everybody relaxed, and they were much more creative and dynamic, and they weren't on their guard. So that's, again, coming back to that awareness piece, isn't it?
Definitely. And like Ray Dalio, investment billionaire, he talks about with the culture within his team where they basically try to break down each other's beliefs and ideas, but in a very helpful and respectful way. It's not just like blowing smoke up people's asses and just going along with it because they're a leader. You want to challenge each other and de-risk.
Your ego is going to have to deal with that. Going back to ego, your ego is going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, because we've all got biases, haven't we? We've just got unconscious biases. We could be, following a belief that's maybe not true, making assumptions that are not quite correct. So you've got to have that real balance between being able to, have that authentic, feeling or drive within you based on your own personal perception, because nobody really knows what the hell we're doing on this planet, do they? So somebody's got to make a call at some point, but having the balance to be able to take on information and understand the context around you. So that's probably that balancing act is what leadership is, I guess.
And being prepared to fail.
That's schoolboy. Failure to adapt to new context. That's what we talked about. What worked before doesn't always work now. Think Kodak Blockbuster. So that's similar in the football situation. It might have been once upon a time very long ball. You punt it down, get a big player up front, 2 forwards. Now Pep Guardiola changed the whole system. Now everybody plays like Pep. Everybody's tried to copy, and now it's sort of adapting to a new era at the moment. But
I prefer that, mate. Just give it a good old punt down the pitch.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Barcelona
it's
now
so
is
much
like
more exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's meant to be entertainment, isn't it? So I guess there's a fine balance between the winning and it looking pretty and being fun. So, but it shows you, for people that didn't adapt, they got left behind.
Yep.
But sometimes you got to know when you are the innovator. It's a balancing act, what we're realizing here with this this game, isn't it? So leaders must evolve.
It's ever evolving.
Obsolete.
It's ever evolving.
It's like Blockbuster. When we read about them, James, it was a very difficult situation for them. Imagine they're making like 6 billion doing something a certain way, and you say, look, there's this little Netflix, it's making a few million a year. How much should we invest and concentrate on this little thing when we're making 6 billion, not realizing how quickly that could turn around? So if you went to your shareholders at that point and said, look, we're going to focus everything on this little thing that's making a couple of million quid. Exactly. So it's hard. It's just hard to make the call sometimes, or get it right. Even with investors, James, that they invest, out of every 100 companies, they know maybe one of them's going to pay back all of their 99 losses. So you got to be prepared to fail, haven't you?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's like you can make the best judgment based on the information that you've got at the time. And you look back through and you can say, oh my God, it's incredible. These unicorn companies that have done really well. But at the end of the day, they didn't know what the future was going to hold. They could have an idea, and they just thought, well, I'll back it. I'm going to back this thing because I think this is how it's going to play out. They couldn't. You can't predict the future.
Yeah,
you've no idea what's going to happen. These businesses that thrive through COVID, nobody knew that was coming.
100%.
And for some people, it was absolutely at the right time, and they just went off the chart.
That's why with this talk on leadership, James, we've got to take into account survivorship bias, because it's easy when you're the one who made the right call. You can potentially get a little bit ahead of yourself to think that you're the oracle. Maybe you've made the right call a couple of times, but somebody's got to make the right call, haven't they? Sometimes, and it can just be a little bit of chance and luck in there as well. We're
using Ray Dalio as an example. I mean, his story was fraught with failure to begin with, and him thinking that he was the oracle and the be all and the end all in terms of investment, and was very quickly spanked by the markets as a result, because he thought he'd struck gold. He thought he had the formula for exponential success, and very quickly found out that he didn't.
Yeah.
So
that's why he wrote that book, didn't he? He wrote Principles to sort of talk about how he thinks around problem solving and understand decision making. So worth a read. And we move on to timeless lessons from iconic historical leaders. James, we start with Mr. Abraham Lincoln. So for him, the lessons are moral clarity and empathy. So when does morality come in, James? Because this is a difficult one. Morals and ethics, isn't it? Especially in a capitalist market, you might be. I'm a little bit on the fence on this one, James, around what's right and wrong. It can be quite blurry, can't it? Because you could say you're in a competition and you want to win, you want to dominate a market, but what if that affects everybody else so badly that it basically ruins society?
Yeah, I mean, social media can be put in that category, can't it? You think, well,
yeah,
how much good it does, but also the downstream effect is, in terms of mental health, it's pretty bloody horrendous, isn't it?
Warren Buffett investing in Coca-Cola, McDonald's sponsoring the Olympics. What's the
World Cup?
What's the net?
Supposedly something that's a good physical thing to be engaged in, sponsored by Coca-Cola.
Big corporates monopolizing industry. These are some of the big moral, ethical challenges of our time when it comes to the accumulation of wealth, inequality, and consolidation of big corporations into huge monopolies. But this is something where it's going to become a major. Well, it is already, but it's going to continue to be a major ethical and moral issue.
I think this kind of ties into B Corps, and there's mixed emotions around becoming a B Corp. Because if you have that on your webpage, you put it out, social media, whatever, you are a B Corp, it says something about you as a business. That, you're ethical, fair, good working practices, all that sort of thing. But then you start to kind of get underneath the surface of it a little bit, and you hear from people that have gone through the process of becoming a B Corp, what that entails, and the hoops that they had to jump through. And then there's a punitive element to it as well, that actually the people that are on the board aren't necessarily in alignment with B Corp, and these different sort of things you hear about, whether it's right or wrong, or it's true or it's false, whatever. But these things are never 100%. No. Maybe when they started it, they had all good intentions. Then this thing grows, and then different factions start to come into play, and then you get pushed and pulled in different directions. And then to continue to exist, you've got to make compromises and sacrifices. And then that ethos starts to get lost a little bit, and it looks a bit different to how you started out. It's a little bit like when you've got a band, for example, and they're playing the clubs and the pubs, and they're very much about the music and their fans, and then they get found by a record label, and then the record label's going, well, you're not going to sell many records like that, chaps. We're going to need to change your sound. We're going to change the clothes that you wear, your look, everything. And they're unrecognizable to how they were when they were playing the clubs and the pubs. And then the fans are like, well, they've sold out, clearly.
Yeah. But it's something to having a moral compass, though, isn't it, James? I know the difficulty, and like you said, with B Corps, it could probably be like the greenwashing and the sustainability movement as well, where things can get a little bit blurry. I think once you have an economy based on, solely profit incentives, and it's sort of a race to the bottom in terms of like a zero marginal cost society, then all of a sudden, when the money's involved in shareholder value, then you're making probably, I think it's Scott Galloway was just saying, like, don't hang your hat potentially on CEOs to have moral judgment, because, a lot of them are trying to create shareholder value, and that is their main prerogative, really. So you just, maybe the top leaders will come out and they have very strong moral standings, like a Mandela type, who are, Jesus, Mandela, Muhammad, like a godlike morality above this sort of economic
beyond
system
reproach.
and doing the right things. And this is what I personally believe, James, is going to come forwards in this AI age. We're going to sort of dismantle society as it is now. You're going to create a lot of optimization, automate different aspects of society. And then we're going to have to get to the crux of what meaning is, what the meaning of work is, what purpose is. And then realistically, we'll look at business as a way of potentially solving problems rather than just making money. Because if you've got access to everything, then you don't really need an accumulation of money, which is just stored access. And then the whole situation just unravels. Maybe not in our lifetime, though.
I think AI is going to be a huge leveler. I think, where we were previously in a situation where there would be pockets of individuals that had all of the knowledge, all of the power, and that we couldn't fact check it particularly. Now we've got a tool where anybody can look at the legal ramifications of something. They can see what the climate implications in terms of change will be. That now with a very quick check or prompt putting into ChatGPT, for example, and the accuracy still isn't 100%, it will get to a point where the learning is there. Yeah. It will become better and better, that within a few seconds you can be the most informed individual on the planet.
Yeah, ridiculously. I download company reports from Companies House, put it into ChatGPT, give me an outlook at this company, give me the background on this person, write this. It's just insane. I reckon there's two sides to that coin, James, like you said. It will become potentially a leveler. I was listening to My First Million podcast, brilliant, if anyone wants to watch that. And they were saying, look, we're probably going to see the first teenage billionaire from a one-person business because of the leverage that AI can give. It's like having software people on steroids where you can create whatever's in your head and then facilitate it through AI agents. This could be a thing, but the people that have got the power at the top, the corporations, is this going to consolidate more power? Because I just don't think the majority, the masses of people are going to be the ones who are high agency. High agency is something you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. Daniel Priestley's mentioned it a lot. Stephen Bartlett's mentioned high agency, the ability to take ideas, take your resources around you and actually proactively do something with it. I just don't see the majority of people being high agency. Do you, James?
I think there's always going to be a small percentage of people that will push that button or pull the trigger on ideas. And again, it comes down to how they deal with that fear. And there's a fine line, isn't there, really, between these people that rise to the top. We've talked about this before, who have personality disorders, psychologically different, let's say. We've got neurodivergency and the diversity of all of that. But, the people that really do the things that majority of people aren't prepared to do have to have some kind of personality, whether you call it a defect or a superpower. Depends on the definition, but they are of a particular type, these individuals.
It could be just their coping strategy from trauma, some type of fear-based drive to not feel good enough.
Some level of trauma at the heart
they
of
say,
it, sure.
Leaders, there's something in there about, having this higher sense of self, but also on the flip side, having this feeling that you're not good enough.
And that overwhelming drive to succeed in something, to fill that void.
But imagine if you feel like you're not good enough constantly. It's like you've made it and it still hasn't scratched that itch. It still hasn't ticked the box. But, you know, is that something to be, is that aspirational? It's like Stephen Bartlett talks a lot about it, doesn't he? Is he really, are these people running away from themselves?
I was
And it
going to say,
looks
they're
like
running
success.
towards something, or they're running away from something.
Yeah. What seems externally success in this particular capitalist game might actually be, you know, a personal trauma. So it is a very complex one, especially when the bigger systemic things change. So again, lead yourself and navigate that one. That's a difficult one. Nelson Mandela, forgiveness as a strategy, emerged from 27 years in prison without bitterness, use empathy to unite a fractured nation. Lesson: true leadership is restraint in the face of revenge and a vision bigger than self. James, we see this across the world, don't we? It's a war, fighting a war because somebody else started a war. You know, eye for an eye. You know, it just can be a constant cyclical negative battle until somebody breaks it. Could be generational trauma, could be, you know, transatlantic trauma, couldn't it? Of going on from generations. But forgiveness, it doesn't mean you forget, but there is a time when you need to sort of let things go and not sort of, you know,
no,
tar everyone with the same brush, I guess.
It's obviously a minor, or doesn't compare, but I had a car accident fairly recently, and it was my fault. I own up to that. And a guy went into the side of me, and he got out the car, and he was just he was fuming. I mean, really, he was angry, rightly so. He'd had a shot, massive amounts of adrenaline, and he wanted to fight. And I put out my hand to shake his hand, and he said, "I don't fucking want to shake your hand." He said, "I want to punch you in the face." So I was like, okay. But I was just, weirdly, I don't know why, that I was very calm as well. So I wasn't feeling the adrenaline, and I was like, oh shit, you know, I knew it was my fault, put my hand up. But he was full of adrenaline and wanting to go. And then I went to give him a hug. And he'd started to, you could see he was starting to sort of decompress, and he was just, and he knew that I wasn't a threat, and that, you know, but if I'd have gone in and reacted to the energy that he was giving out in that moment in time, that's the that's the incendiary part, the explosive part. So, and I don't know, you know, at any given time, if I'd have been in a different mindset, that may have been very different, but it's an indication of how you can diffuse a situation by saying, look, I know it was my fault. I admit that. I should have seen him. I didn't see him. He said, well, how could you not have seen me? I said, well, I just didn't, because I wouldn't have pulled out if I had. But, you know, it just very, very quickly, this situation calmed down. I was able to make sure, and eventually did let me sort of like shake his hand, and, you know, I obviously apologized. So that's, just an anecdotal indication of a situation where
good example there, isn't it, of like emotional regulation, being able to, in the chaos, even when you're triggered, to be able to calm yourself. We had it yesterday with one of our guests, didn't we? From what was it yesterday?
What, with James?
With James, yeah, when he talked about, you know, don't make any harsh decisions when something bad happens straight away. Always give yourself
to an email. Yeah,
give yourself some time, regulate your emotional state before you react. And I guess some of the best people in the world, whether they're athletes, whether they're leaders, they are, you know, they can refocus quite quickly, and then they can regulate, and, you know, they can change their mind, but in a way that's quite calm. I think it was Johnny Wilkinson talked about it, the A cup, acting cool under pressure when you're doing your your rugby kicks. So I think that's quite a big one. So next up, we got Winston Churchill speaking vision in crisis. Use language and presence to inspire when all hope seems lost. The lesson for this one, James: leadership demands communication that moves people, especially during chaos. This is very true. The power of words, James. I guess media, we were talking about this before we went on, about the top billionaires now, the top 4 guys who have got like $1 trillion+ in net worth have got more than the next couple of 100 billionaires behind them. And basically they're all media guys. We've got Elon at the top, we've got Zuckerberg, we've got the Amazon, Jeff Bezos, I can't remember, it might be Larry Ellison or somebody behind that, but they're all sort of personal brand media type people. We know that in politics how important
Rupert Murdoch, that type of family, who controls the messaging, controls the masses. So words, they're huge, aren't they, James? I guess when it comes to leadership, saying the right things at the right time in the right tone is big. So I think it was, what was the neuro-linguistic programming, what they would say, that I can't remember the exact percentages, but something like 70% of your communication is like tonality, another percentage what you say, and then something, and then I can't remember what the last one was, but I'll put that one down. But a lot of it is more your tone, your energy, your conviction. I guess sometimes you can say stuff with a lot of certainty and it might be completely wrong, but because you've said it and you believe with enough conviction, you
can convince people.
I mean, a complete
anything.
idiot,
Shows you.
for example, can say something, if they say it with enough conviction, can make people second guess themselves.
Yeah, but beliefs and stories are huge, James. I probably never give them enough credit, the power of a story. I'm sometimes can be, in my fear-based self, quite logical. So storytelling is just so big, isn't it? Everything's a belief and a story, whether that's money is a story, countries are a story, your own personal name is a story, society is a story. It's what they call in the Sapiens with Noah Harari, maybe that's his name, is everything's like a fictional entity. And everything is like that across the board. It's just a belief. And that's the differentiator between humans and our monkey brothers, is that we can coordinate with thousands, hundreds of us through stories where animals like monkeys can't. They just can't coordinate at that volume. And there's like 8 billion of us, and somehow, it might not be perfect, but we are interacting in a very complex system.
Yeah, we can mobilize nations with words, can't you?
Yeah.
If you want for good and for bad.
Yeah.
And you think if you want to polarize against a particular faction, then the words and the narrative that you use will be hugely influential as to how people feel about that particular element.
Yeah. And even just with marketing, James, look at all of the thumbnails, the headings, the titles. Like literally 80% of your content is pretty much loss aversion. People are more geared towards avoidance of fear than they are towards something that's good for them. So that's like a psychological premise. Like if you missed the apple in the tree in the savannah, it's fine. It's not going to kill you. If you missed a snake, then that could potentially kill you. So you're more observant of things that are painful or potential threats. So in marketing, loss aversion seems to be the thing that works, especially like on thumbnail titles on YouTube and other things like that. So having that awareness that these type of things do, dictate.
I think to
behavior.
Your point, that story is attached to survival.
And
that's why we give it so much credence, because it's those stories that help us to avoid those situations that can kill us. generation to generation. That's why sitting down around the fire was so important, to then impart those stories so that they can, and also making sense of the world. That, you know, the sun coming up in the morning and the moon at night, you know, that those things happen every day.
Yeah.
So why do they happen? And storytelling around that observation that then evolves through time. But certainly, you know, when they talk about going out into the wilderness and fighting a lion or rites of passage, it just enables you to be connected to your ancestors, and then how you see the future and how to move forward through the future. And each time that you have a different experience, that then becomes part of the narrative, which then helps evolution.
And I guess evolution is probably, in a way, whichever way you describe consciousness, but it might be an elevation of our consciousness to go from sort of a fear-based consciousness to the potential for abundance, away from, you know, the scarcity that was a reality in the past. There might not have been enough to go round. We didn't know how to control the environment. Now we're sort of, you know, we're in control of the environment. We can create an abundance of food. We could create an abundance of shelter. That we're moving into this abundance economy, but still in a scarcity, fear-based mindset. So even that type of marketing speak around fear might evolve into something that's more positive, purpose, meaning driven. Maybe not yet, but maybe that's where we're going. We've got Genghis Khan here, merit over birthright.
Just for good measure.
Yeah. Built
Good
the
old
world's
Genghis.
largest land empire by promoting people based on ability, not heritage. Great lesson here. Great leaders unearth potential, not protecting privilege. So Genghis Khan, I reckon there was some stats out there that, I don't know, 1 in 11 people alive today is related to Genghis Khan.
He got a bad press, did Genghis?
I think he murdered quite a few million people, but apparently when he sort of took over a tribe, he wouldn't be so fixated on their, you know, ethnicity and religion. He would bring...
It was all for equal opportunities.
Yeah. He would have all different people, and he saw that as an advantage because they weren't going to, you know, all get together and try and overthrow him. So the more diversity for him was better.
No small feat to take over that amount of Europe.
And he wasn't from privilege, was he? He was from the streets, from the hood. Old Genghis, I think. So Joan of Arc, conviction against the odds. A teenage girl led armies by embodying belief with every word and action. Lesson here: authority isn't given; it's earned through clarity of mission and personal example. On that one, James. So Joan of Arc, I don't know much about Joan of Arc. Insights from modern leadership books. Good to Great by Jim Collins. Great leaders are often level 5 leaders, humble yet fiercely driven. Key takeaway here: humility plus will equals enduring leadership. Have you read Good to Great, Jim Collins, James?
No, heard a lot about it, haven't read it.
Haven't read that. We'll touch on the other book by Simon Sinek, Start With Why, and this book, Leaders Eat Last. We mentioned this earlier. So trust and safety create the highest performing teams. Trust is a big one, isn't it? Yep. Built over time. Huge. You know, it takes ages to build. It's probably easy to lose, isn't it? You can lose trust in
trust is hard won, but easy to lose.
Key takeaway from Simon Sinek on that one: leadership is about creating environments where people feel safe to thrive. This is going to be a difficult one in modern environments, isn't it, James? With that feeling that your job is potentially going to be taken over by AI. There's a lot of politics within big corporations. And competition as well. Who do you trust? Who should you bring on board? So I guess it's a difficult one. Would you say?
Well, I think COVID had a massive impact on that, didn't it? Where everybody was in a building where they could be kept an eye on and seemingly controlled and directed. And then all of a sudden they're working from home and everything went out the window.
Yeah.
And they found that actually people were potentially more productive working from home because they didn't have the commute, they didn't have the downtime. And
I
it
wonder
was
if that's
about,
true. Do you reckon that's true, James? People are
well,
more productive at home.
yeah, it
I don't know if
depends. It depends who you speak to. I mean, there's people that I've spoken to that, loved it, and other people that absolutely hated it, and then other, businesses that reported massive loss, and other ones that productivity went up through the roof. So,
yeah.
it's a difficult one to call, but I think at the end of the day, it's this thing where it's about trust and thinking that if all of your workforce are working from home, they're not going to be doing any work.
Yeah.
And whether you give them that level of agency and autonomy to go, well, actually, I've got a job to do and I want to do it really well because that makes me feel good, makes me feel like I'm part of something. And then it comes down to the storytelling again and how you communicate your mission statement down through to your workforce to say, this is what we're trying to achieve here. And if you feel like you're trying to do some good in the world, or whatever you're doing is helping somebody else, then maybe that gives you that sense of purpose enough to be able to go, well, actually, I'm making a difference here. We all want to feel like we're making a difference. Don't want to feel like we're just creating this widget. It doesn't matter if we go to work or we don't go to work. We'd like to feel like if I don't turn up, then that's going to make a difference.
Yeah, difficult one, isn't it? Because some people from home feel like they can never switch off. They can't separate their work from their own life. But in some businesses, it's so meaning and purpose driven, and they're part of the story that work is the life, and there's nothing wrong with that either, is there? On that
and the
side?
workload then potentially increased because they weren't commuting, so they had that level of expectation that they would log on at 8:30 in the morning. They wouldn't log off until 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Yeah, you got
and
to
then they would
balance
have meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting because there was no commute, there was no downtime, and then the expectations went up that they were able to be more productive because they weren't in the office, they weren't having to travel. So double-edged sword.
Balancing that. So another one, Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's the foundation of courage. Key takeaway here is that shame kills performance. So vulnerability builds trust. So the shame on the levels of consciousness by Hawkins, isn't it? Shame,
everything.
Guilt. Shame, guilt, fear.
Piece.
That's
shame,
right.
Guilt, fear.
And we've done a authenticity pod before, haven't we? Talking about authenticity, vulnerability. It's a big piece, definitely, to maybe not overshare when not necessary, but to resonate with people, to really touch their soul, to show that you're not different from them, you're in the same boat. Sometimes when you let people in, it can create and foster a lot of trust, can't it, James?
Yeah, the surprise from people when they go, I just never knew. I never knew you felt that way. I always thought you had everything together. What, you feel? No, I can't believe it. I can't believe that you felt that way. And they go, because I feel that way. And I don't see you in the same light as I see myself. But all of a sudden, you've got that commonality. You go, well, shit, if they feel that way, it's kind of okay for me to feel that way. And they can still function in the world. And I had no idea. So I think that kind of opening up just allows other people to connect with you, to feel something for you and feel something for themselves. So I think it's quite it's a big responsibility.
It's a huge responsibility, and you're right. And what got me thinking on that, James, is the difference between probably connecting and leading with men and women. There are obviously variances in both sexes with personalities, but from my experience, I find that men bond quite well through experience. Maybe women bond slightly differently, and how receptive they are to certain leadership types, I would say, vary. So I think you got to be quite strategic and understanding on how you approach both sexes. I would say.
Well, we've got a really interesting conversation coming up in a couple of weeks they're going to talk about exactly that. So it's with a female founder from India. So yeah, really looking forward to that. That's going to be a fascinating pod.
Last ones, James. 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell. Positional leadership, title based, is the lowest level. Influence is earned through results, relationships, and mentoring others. Key takeaway here: you don't grow a company, you grow people who grow the company. So probably talk about a lot of self-development within, bringing out people's best, and really facilitating what they're good at and what they want to do to help your company grow. So I like that one. 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, also a good book. Quite scary in parts, that book. It could be a little bit of a psychopath.
Is it?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, because it talks about the manipulation and how people gain power. It's a good, interesting book. It says power dynamics are real. Understand the game, but don't lose your soul. Key takeaway here: use strategy, but don't mistake manipulation for mastery.
Yeah.
So there is a difference between leaders.
Fine old line.
Yeah, where you're manipulating people and people are following you like some type of cult.
Yeah.
But the actual direction of it is not very healthy. Maybe you're preying on people's insecurities for your own.
Narcissism is another really interesting term. It doesn't necessarily mean what people think it means. But you've got an overt and a covert narcissist. So it's have an awareness of the individual that are appearing to be one way and behind closed doors are very, very different.
Yeah, and the Big 5 personality test is good for that one. Neuroticism and things like that. It will give you your score on your own levels of narcissistic sort of tendencies, because everybody will have them. It says here, James, what the great leaders did differently. Last bit: they serve something bigger than themselves. Freedom, peace, unity, truth. Tapping into that truth takes probably not as easy as it sounds and when you say it. So they led with long term in mind. So a lot of businesses are quarterly based, aren't they? Quarterly shareholder meetings. So you might be in a position where you're sort of forced to try to do things that are very short term because you want to survive. But the best leaders may be thinking long term, like Bezos. I think he had a very long term project, didn't
strategy. Yeah.
With that. And again, Elon Musk as well. It's a very long term product process. And they're thinking decades. They're not thinking, 3 months away. They're thinking into the future.
Yeah.
They were willing to change their minds. That's a big one. With new evidence emerged. So they're having that, that humble feeling that they could be wrong. They're open to change with new information. They use stories and symbols to align people emotionally and culturally. Again, the storytelling, like we said, is a huge part of leadership. And they earned trust repeatedly, not just once, probably by showing up with a lot of consistency, built trust over time. So I think we'll leave it there.
Great way to end it, mate.
Yeah, so just for people, if you want to build on that leadership side, we would say audit your leadership. Are you respected or obeyed, trusted or feared? Ask your team anonymously. That's probably a good way to do it, with sort of the reports that you can do internally to see how things are going. Commit to a leadership practice: listening, storytelling, reflecting, or mentorship. That's something that we facilitate with lives that we do with leaders on a regular basis. That's something where you can amplify your voice, get your message out there, be trusted, be seen over a long period of time. And then remember, people don't follow perfection, they follow progress. It doesn't need to be shiny and perfect and scripted. Probably like with politicians, like we said before, the more polished and scripted, and you just
connect with it.
You
Just
switched off.
Switch off.
Yeah, we spoke to Lloyd Price before this, didn't we, about what he was saying about his friends in PR, and they're talking about how these commercials, high-end commercials, are
Be yourself.
Are being sort of replaced by real, authentic, real presentation.
It's a bit scrappy. It's a bit, ragged around the edges, and we like that because we're all ragged around the edges, right?
Yeah, bit more truth, bit more real. So thanks for listening, guys. That was leadership, and we hope you have a fantastic day. Okay, James?
It was a pleasure.
Take care. Lead the future. Lead the way.
Much
Bye-bye.
love. Bye, bye, bye.